Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into quite a serious situation that's been developing between Kenya and Tanzania.
Yeah, it involves the detention and really disturbing allegations of torture of Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and also Ugandan activist Agatha Atuhare. They were both in Tanzania.
Right. We've got news reports, statements from Mwangi's lawyer, which are quite harrowing, official lines from the Kenyan government, and, well, some pretty strong opinions flying around, too.
For sure. So our goal here is to really try and understand the sequence of events, how Kenya responded or maybe didn't respond initially, and what this whole thing might mean more broadly.
Okay, let's start with why Boniface Mwangi was even in Tanzania. He went to observe the treason trial of opposition figure Tundu Lissu, correct?
That's right. He was there in Dar es Salaam specifically for that purpose, but reports say he was arrested pretty soon after arriving. And the details, initially at least, were very thin on the ground.
And the Kenyan government seemed, well, out of the loop. They couldn't get consular access or find out why he was being held.
Exactly. That was a major early point. Kenya sent a formal protest note saying, look, we've asked repeatedly for access, we've asked for details, and we're getting nothing. That's not how things are supposed to work.
No, definitely raises flags. And it wasn't just Mwangi, was it? Agatha Atuhare, the Ugandan activist, was detained around the same time.
Yes, she was with him, apparently, and her situation adds another really concerning layer to this whole event.
Then Mwangi is released and gets back to Nairobi. And the story from his lawyer is, well, it's grim. Describing him as unable to walk or stand properly, saying Tanzanian security forces tortured him.
Yeah, and expressing serious concern for Agatha as well. Mwangi himself reportedly described being forced during the torture to say Asante Mama Samia over and over, thanking the Tanzanian president.
That detail is just, it's hard to process. And it lines up with the lawyer's account of his physical state needing immediate medical care.
Absolutely. It paints a really stark picture of what he allegedly went through.
Okay, let's talk about the Kenyan government's reaction. Musalia Mudavadi, the Foreign Affairs CS, his initial statement called it unfortunate. Yeah, unfortunate. That feels remarkably mild, doesn't it?
It does. Unfortunate seems like a word you'd use for a delayed flight, not alleged state-sponsored torture of your citizen. He spoke about using diplomatic channels, emphasized keeping relations with Tanzania cordial.
Which is interesting, right? Prioritizing those cordial relations before maybe getting the full facts or, registering stronger protest about a citizen's welfare. It felt a bit detached.
I think that's a fair observation. That initial tone definitely struck some people as, well, perhaps not matching the gravity of the allegations that were emerging, almost like playing it down.
And then there was that shift. A later government statement called it a wake-up call for Kenyans, warning them not to take freedoms for granted, and crucially, saying Kenyan rights don't apply outside Kenya.
Right, which almost sounds like, well, you were in another country, what did you expect? It kind of shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from Tanzania's actions and maybe onto the individual.
It does feel like a bit of a deflection. And Mudavadi also emphasized needing to follow protocols for observing foreign court cases. Again, subtly putting the onus back on the activists.
It certainly could be interpreted that way. It makes you question how forcefully the government was prepared to advocate for its citizens in this specific instance, especially compared to, say, maintaining diplomatic appearances.
And amidst all this back and forth about Mwangi, the silence around Agatha Atuhare is deafening. Mwangi's out, but where is she?
That's the deeply worrying part now. The Ugandan government is asking Tanzania for information, requesting consular access, just like Kenya did initially for Mwangi.
And Mwangi's lawyer specifically flagged concerns for her safety, saying Mwangi indicated she was also tortured, possibly severely. Her status being unknown is, it's alarming.
It really is. The focus has understandably been on Mwangi's release, but her situation needs urgent attention.
Now, this hasn't happened in a vacuum. We saw some really controversial commentary, didn't we? Like President Ruto's aide, Farouk Kibet.
Oh, yes. His comments were quite something. Accusing the activists of exporting bad manners from Kenya and suggesting Tanzania should deal with them, quote, family.
Family. That sounds quite ominous and incredibly dismissive of torture allegations. It's like saying internal discipline almost.
It really minimizes the severity, doesn't it? It plays into this idea of regional solidarity, maybe, over individual human rights, a very different framing from the lawyer's condemnation of torture.
And then completely the opposite take from another Kenyan commentator. Very assertive, calling Kenya an East African superpower. criticizing Tanzania's development, its constitution.
Yeah, demanding Tundu Lissu's release, reminding people how Kenya has sheltered figures like Somali leaders in the past. It was a really strong nationalistic stance.
And this commentator also took aim at the Kenyan government itself, right? For being, in their view, too reactive, too soft initially, and even connecting it to cracking down on dissent within Kenya.
Exactly. It highlights this huge split in how people are seeing this. One view is all about regional harmony, maybe looking the other way sometimes. The other is about national pride, projecting power, and demanding accountability, both abroad and at home.
Mwangi's lawyer really drove home the human rights angle, didn't he? Saying East Africa is failing her sons and daughters, condemning torture under international law.
Absolutely. And stressing that Mwangi and Atuhare hadn't done anything illegal, they were just observers. That point is crucial. They were participating in a process, not breaking laws, according to him.
Which makes the alleged response seem completely disproportionate. The lawyer's language about Tanzania, calling it potentially a murderous regime, that's incredibly strong.
It is. It speaks to the perceived risk for anyone, maybe especially Tanzanians, who challenge the authorities there, and it raises that question you touched on earlier.
Why them? Why Mwangi and Atuhare? Were other observers, maybe from other countries, treated this way? Seems unlikely.
It does suggest they were singled out. But why? Their profile as activists, their nationality. We don't have those answers yet.
And the lawyer has vowed to seek justice, so this probably isn't over.
Likely not. It really throws that whole diplomatic tightrope walk into focus, doesn't it? How do you maintain good relations while standing up for your citizens when they face serious trouble abroad, especially in politically sensitive contexts?
It's the core dilemma. Where does respecting sovereignty end and the duty to protect your own citizens begin, especially when fundamental rights like freedom from torture are allegedly violated?
Yeah. So, wrapping up where we are now, Boniface Mwangi is back in Kenya, alleging horrific torture. Agatha Atuhare's whereabouts and condition remain unknown, which is terrifying.
And we've seen this spectrum of reactions from what seemed like an initially, let's say, understated Kenyan government response, maybe prioritizing diplomacy, to fierce condemnation from lawyers and activists, and then these clashing commentaries reflecting different views on Kenya's role and responsibilities.
Exactly. The why behind the detentions and the alleged torture is still murky, and Agatha Atuhare's fate hangs heavy over everything. It really forces a look at how East African nations interact and how much protection citizens can truly expect when they engage in activism across borders.
So here's the thought to leave you with. Beyond this specific, awful incident, what does it reveal about the health of human rights protections and diplomatic norms in the East African community today? And, maybe more pointedly, given the initial reactions we discussed, how far will governments truly go to bat for their citizens abroad when things get politically messy?